All right, this is Jojo, this is Dawson, and this is their roadmap to success. As you can see, these are super duper cute doggies. As you can see by her energy, they're also quick twitch dogs. And I think one of the primary issues that they have is she gets reactive to other dogs on walks. I didn't see it, so I don't know if it's a fearful thing, excited, or territorial, or it could be a combination of all those. But she's, basically the Guardians didn't really have a lot of structure in place. They've done a good job in terms of training them for some stuff, but the dogs didn't have any practice of self-restraint. And as a behaviorist, what I like to do is I like to create situations where the dog can practice an element of the behavior that we want independent of the actual activity. A lot of times when we have dogs, we're asking them to not jump up on people, but the only time we try to practice that when people come to our house, which is not the best time because we're thinking about being a host. As you can see, she climbs up and licks. And she's a big licker. Yes, you are. And so what I like to do is find scenarios where we can help the dog practice one of those elements. So we went over a whole bunch of different stuff in the session. One of the first things we went over, the importance of rules. Right now, this is kind of breaking one of the rules. One of the rules we went over was not allowing the dogs on the furniture for 30 days or as long as the problem's still going on. Now, to ask the dog to get off the furniture, what I usually do is take out a treat the first time, and I toss it on the ground. You won't see her now because she's off the couch, and I say the word off. Remember, anytime she gets a treat, they should hear the command word after the treat goes in the mouth. And I saw that sit, buddy. That was awesome. And so this way we put things in context. Getting off the couch is a rewardable action. And then after they get the first one, then after that, if they try to come back, then I would sit here and block them when they try to jump up. There's kind of a little bit of a step here to get to this level, and they kind of use this as almost like a step in itself. So the Guardians may want to get some X mats temporarily, probably get 2 or 3 of them, you can put them on here and it'll stop the dogs from getting up here. The problem with them being up here is for dogs, the higher they sit, the more rank or social status they have. And they like to sit up here on the back of the couch, which is higher than the humans. Also, we have a wonderful, really beautiful window in the front where the dogs can actually see out that window, and they do bark if anybody passes in front of the house. I think they think they're practicing being guard dogs. So one of the things I recommend the Guardians do is on the outside of the house, hey buddy, is we get some white paper and fill up each of the lowest pane of the window. So because the windows go almost down to the floor. This way, when the dog goes to the window, they can't see out. So every time they hear a sound and they go over there to be a patrol dog, well, I can't see out, so I don't know if I'm barking at anything appropriate or not. They're still going to bark at the sounds at first, but eventually it will dissipate and they'll do it less and less. And this is, like I said, where they like to hang out. So this is higher than the humans. This gives them the impression that they have to be protective or possessive of us. This is demanding attention from me. And if I give the dog attention or give her a treat when she's doing this, then I'm rewarding that particular behavior. I'm pretty sure because of the cuteness of the dogs is when they climb up on the Guardians or nudge them or scratch at them, that the Guardians are reaching over to pet them because they're such cute dogs. But that can confuse the dog into thinking that they have dominion over the humans because when they tell the humans what to do, the humans listen. So instead of doing that, what I went over was my petting with a purpose philosophy, which is just if he wants me to pet him, sit, and then I can pet him. I say the word sit as soon as he sits. I can pet him as long as I want at this point. I'm not petting her because I didn't ask her to jump up and sit. That's passive training, which I'm going to talk about in a sec. So petting with a purpose is when we want to pet the dog or the dog is demanding attention from us, we ask the dog to do something to earn it. This boosts the dog's self-esteem. It helps the dog reinforce the healthy leader-follower dynamic. It develops more respect for the humans as authority figures, and also helps the dog practice that particular behavior, which will make it easier for them to do it in more difficult situations, like I talked about at the beginning of the video, practicing the behavior independent of the other activity. So the more we make the dog sit in the house to get attention, then we're at the door or we're going to go through the leashing process, it's easier for the dog to sit. And also it's helping them take a more subordinate position. Sitting is more subordinate, laying down is a surrender position. So that's kind of one of the things we talked about in the video above this. Crash. This is passive training, which I'm going to talk about in a sec. So if I come in the room, we won't realize how often we pet the dogs without a purpose. So if I come in the room and I see one of the Guardians is petting the dog and the dog's standing up, I would say paycheck. Paycheck means I suspect you may have forgotten to pet the dog or ask the dog to do something to earn it. So if I'm petting the dog, somebody says paycheck, I should throw my hands up in the air, tell the dog to sit or lay down or do something, and then pet it and say sit or down or whatever it is. And then I can tell the other person, I asked the dog to sit before you came in the room, and when the dog stood up and you missed that, but I continued petting after it stood up, but I did pet with a purpose and you just weren't there for it. We won't realize how often we pet without a purpose, so that's just a little way to help us make sure we're staying on track. Now, even if you want to pet the dogs, because I think these dogs have been petted so much, And petting a dog is great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I think these dogs, the biggest primary issue is I think they think they are peers or superior to their humans, and they don't think the humans listen to them, so they have to bark like crazy when they see people or dogs on walks or people passing the house, because my humans don't listen to me and they might get taken advantage of. So if I act really ferocious, I can make the other dog walk away before they get a chance to take advantage of my humans, who are not very street smart in the dog's perspective. And the reason for this is we didn't have a lot of rules and structure, and we're petting the dog and giving it what it wants. I consider petting a dog paying the dog. Now, the guardians were petting the dogs when they were super excited when they came home from work. We were letting them out of the kennel when they were super excited. We're feeding them when they were super excited, putting them on leashes when we're excited. Excited is an unbalanced state of mind. It's not what we want the dog to do if we want them to be able to think clearly. The guardians in this house have really important jobs, and they do big time stuff. And when they're doing those things, they're not going to do it when they're all worried about something else or they're all worked up because of an argument. If you have an important phone call, you stop and you center yourself, you close your eyes, you focus on what you want to do, then you execute it. These dogs are so excited, I think that a lot of mistakes are happening because of the excitement. So helping the dogs practice calming down before I pet them or put them on the leash or whatever it is going to help them develop self-control that will help in other elements of their life. Going back to the rules, some of the other rules I went over is not being allowed to be on the carpet around the table behind me, or not being allowed in the kitchen when we're preparing food, or being around the other dog when it's eating food. Now, I went through the 4 escalating consequences I used to disagree with unwanted actions and behavior, and the guardians are primarily going to use the 3rd escalating consequence to move the dogs away from the table. Now, you have to be careful with the table because the dogs are short and lower than us, and they're going to go under the table, and they're kind of at an advantage there. I don't know for a fact, but based on something that was going on in the session, I'm guessing there's probably a tennis racket in the house. No, I'm impressed. We were watching tennis earlier. I like to use a tennis racket because these dogs are so small. I'm 6'1", I have to reach way down to block them. If I have a tennis racket, that extends the reach of my arm by about 3 feet. So you might want to go to a sporting goods store and get a tennis racket. It's not to hit the dogs, it's just to extend the reach of your arm to block them from going underneath the table. And we're going to use that 3rd escalating consequence. The first one I do is I hiss 1 time per incident. And when I hiss, I make a hiss like, tss. They're too relaxed. There, I got 1 look. I have 10 hisses. I have a level 1 hiss, which is like a tss. I have level 10 where I have to hold up my hand because I'm spindling, I'm saying it so loud. Match their level of energy. If they're at level 5 energy, hiss at them at level 5 hiss, or it's level 6 hiss. Only hiss 1 time per incident. Second thing I do is I abruptly stand up and turn to face the dog. Keep the dog in front of me as it paces around the room. Wait for it to stop, sit, or lie down. When it does, I take 2 steps backwards, left, right, and I stop. Then I pause for 1 second. That's like putting a period at the end of the sentence. Then I can go back to doing what I'm doing. However, if you sit down, you lose some perceived authority. You should expect the dog to challenge you again. We went through this multiple times in the session where the dog kind of would go back, forward, the human would block them, wait for the dog to pause, then take a step back. That causes the dog to come forward, and we go forward and back. It's like a waltz. You'll do that a lot initially. Don't get frustrated about that. That is to be expected. But if you're consistent about it, within a couple days to a week, the dogs will stop coming back when you challenge them with the 3rd escalating consequence, which is to march deliberately at the dog until it turns sideways or further away from you. At that point, we stop, we freeze in place, we go to the 2nd consequence, we pivot as the dog moves around, when it's stationary, 2 steps back, pause for 1 second, go back to doing what you're doing. The only time the 3rd consequence doesn't apply is if the dog is breaking a rule. Let's say that there's a line right here, the dog is not supposed to be on this side of the line, and I march at the dog, and it's turned sideways, but still it's still in an area it's not supposed to be in. I would continue bumping into the dog until it crossed the line. And that's how we enforce an invisible boundary, like around the kitchen. It's basically what I showed you how to do with feeding the dogs. Now again, the dogs are going to come back and forth over and over again, so we have to be diligent. Now, one of the tricks that I went over is creating a stage scenario where it can help the dog practice. So we have the dogs practice staying away from the kitchen table by microwaving a piece of roast beef, sitting at a table like we're going to really eat, and cutting it in half and putting it on each plate and pretend cutting it. If the dog crosses the threshold, we stop what we're doing and we rush at them. We're eating an actual meal, we're focused on eating, and it's an afterthought to pay attention to the dogs. Well, this is a warm-up practice session. You can do the same thing with cooking in the kitchen. Microwave a piece of bacon, take it out, put the plate on the counter. The dog's going to smell that smell and want to come in, and you march at them using the 3rd consequence. Now, when you march away from them, one of the guardians had a tendency to step, step, step. We want to do left foot, right foot, pause for a half a second. Left foot, right foot, or right foot, left foot, pause for a half a second. The pausing between each step is important because it tells the dog, I'm not just walking away from you, I'm walking back, but I want you to stay where you're at. And if you turn and give your back to the dog, they'll run right up. Eventually you can do that, but initially face the dog, walk backwards, left, right, pause, left, right, pause. You can do that for a lot of different activities as we talked about in the session. Now, when people come home, the dogs get very excited, and somebody's going to come home in a minute, you're going to get a chance to see it. But basically the dogs get up and they rush the door. Now, we have kind of an airlock in the front of the house here, and the nice thing is the guardians in the house have a way of looking into the airlock. So what I would do is just, or looking out of the airlock, I guess is a better way to say it. So when you come in the airlock and the dogs are all excited out of the room, that's when they get excited. So when they get excited, and they, if we come in the room or if we pet them, when they're excited, that's the energy that we're going to be rewarding. So instead what we want to do is wait for, come in the entryway and just wait. The dogs are going to be all crazy excited. We just sit down, maybe put a chair in the entryway, wait for them to relax, and when they relax, take a step towards the door, and that's going to cause them to get excited. We reach for the handle. Maybe when I first came, I opened it a little bit and closed it. Open it and closed it. And I kept on waiting for the dog's energy to come down. By the time I came in the room, I had opened and closed it like 10 times. Their energy was pretty calm because they can't stay in that heightened sense of alert. So look for ways to delay gratification like that. I make dogs sit before I let them in or out of the door. If we're playing fetch, I make them sit and then drop the treat before I throw, or the ball before I throw it, or sit and wait 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Gradually elongate it. We also did this for feeding the dogs. We made them wait. Jojo was all over the place trying to get in the room, and Dawson walked away. So we fed Dawson first. He's older, and we also we want to reward the behavior. He didn't challenge, she did. So he got the reward. He's a little bit older, so I'd probably feed him first, but if all things are equal, that's what I would do. But if he's challenging and being a pill, then change the order and feed her. Reward the action or the behavior that you're looking for. Now, real quick, what I like to do is whenever I have dogs that have a behavior problem, and this is kind of a quick synopsis of what I do for a living, the guardians can apply this to any application. What you want to do is break down the activity into the easiest possible scenario. So remove as many elements as you can so it's the core part of the activity. Then help the dog practice the first step over and over and over again until they're doing that first step for you automatically. Only after that, go to the second step, and then the third step, and go through all the individual steps until you have all of them done completely. Then you can bring them all together at the same time. And so now we've taught the dog how we want to behave in each capacity of the element, and then we bring them all together. It's easier for the dog to do. Then we start making it more and more real world until we get back to the real world situation, and the dogs are handling it with aplomb. Let me see. Other rules we went over: having to sit before you go through the door. Sit. Tell them to sit and wait 3 seconds. If they don't sit by the time you say three, by the time you count to 3, walk away and sit down somewhere for 1 minute. After 1 minute, go back and then tell them to sit again. And they have 3 seconds to comply. If they don't comply by the 3rd second, walk away this time for 2 minutes, then 4 minutes, then 8 minutes. Eventually, as soon as you go and say sit and one of them sits, open the door and let that dog out. Now we have coyotes and foxes and wolves and stuff around here, so the guardians don't want the dogs to go out in their yard unsupervised, so maybe one of the guardians would go out with that dog. But eventually what will happen is the dogs will figure out sitting is the only way to get the door to open, and they'll start sitting off faster and faster. This is the same principle I talked about in the video above about releasing the dog from the kennel, except for asking the dog to sit at the door instead of asking them to lay down. And eventually you can do it with both directions. I also went through an exercise of teaching the dogs to stay calm before the walk. Now we have a really great dog walker that came by and she was sat in on that. And so I had one of the guardians going through this. And what she did is she walked to where the dog leash was kept. As soon as the dog walked in front, Dawson kept on walking in front. As soon as she walked in front, she walked away and sat down. Once he came back and he was settled, wait for him to calm down, she got up and repeated the process. It took several times, but eventually he figured out and he started staying behind her. At one point she went through the door and he was going to go through first and looked up and waited for her to go through, which is beautiful. That's what we're looking for. Then when she got to where the leash was, she told him to sit. Then she broke down if this is where the leash is actually at. The first time she reached this far and pulled her hand back. She told him to sit first and then reach this far, then this far, then this far, then this far, and then eventually she picked it up and put it right back down. Anytime the dog got up, she would stop the process, wait for him to sit. If he doesn't sit within a couple seconds, she would walk away. If you practice this, especially at times when you're not going to take your dogs for a walk, after a while they're like, oh, this is the leashing, actually, this is boring. I've done this 100 times. Oh, we're walking? and you kind of catch them by surprise. But the dog's energy before the walk is the energy they're going to carry on the walk. Now, to help the dogs with the walking, I went over, I fitted them up with some martingale collars, and I showed the guardians how to add the special twist to the leash. Now, remember when you're doing this, to make sure that you are, that you're actually, the dogs are calm before you do this. But when you add the special twist leash, make sure you keep that leash short but not tense. Give each dog a right or left side, and I would always have Dawson on the right or the left. I think we had him on the right, and always have Jojo on the left. That way we can correct them independently, and if they don't know where to go, they kind of hang out together. Jojo have a tendency to kind of body check Dawson a little bit and get in his space, and that's kind of, I think, a little bit of a younger dog rivalry sort of scenario. But on a walk, we want the dogs to pay attention to us. Now, what I also do is each block, I try to stop and give the dog like a 1 minute free time. So undo the special twist of the martingale collar and let them sniff. They can poop, they can pee, they can do their business. If they stop to poop or pee, we stop and do that as well. But if they stop to sniff when we're on a walk, whenever they want, then they're driving. We need them to pay attention to us for most of the walk, but once on each block, we're gonna stop and give them like a minute to sniff around, which is very stimulating for them and it's healthy for them. But by doing these things, we're helping the dogs practice some self-control. I also went over a focus exercise. If the guardians forget how to do that, please message me. I have videos that I can show you. I'm going to try to remember to put it in the link above. So if you're reading this and there's not the focus, send me a text and I'll add it in there. When you're doing that text, we want to make sure that we build up the ability for the dog to stay focused for longer periods of time. And get to the 15-second mark within, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
One of the guardians got to go home and bring home the bacon. And so we want to get to that 15-second mark within 7 days. Then we want to practice it outside and eventually practice on the walks. But if the guardians practice that as I described in the video, then they can actually develop a very strong way to recall and redirect the dog's attention away from something instead of looking at us. We went over structured feeding. The dogs did great. It was a bit of a challenge, and eventually it will get better and better. Stick with it for a week, and after the end of the week, you'll be amazed at how much easier it is. Practice letting them in and out of the kennel as I described in the video above. And again, take Dawson away, because I think as soon as Dawson was away, Jojo was able to listen a lot better. I'm probably forgetting a couple other things. If you have any questions on things we went over, or there's things that I forgot to go over that you forgot to ask me about, please call me or text me. I want to be here for you. I can only help you, though, if you let me know you still need help. Okay, dogs, come here. I need dogs for this wrap up. Come here, Dawson. Dawson. Come here, buddy. This is Dawson. This is Jojo. This is the roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.